Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another review. Today we're taking a look at Borderlands the Pre-Sequel. Borderlands the Pre-Sequel is a co-op shooter for up to 4 players, but can also be experienced alone if you prefer a single-player game. For those unfamiliar with the previous Borderlands titles, there are 4 classes to choose from that vary slightly from game to game. Each class has its own talent trees and abilities, and they are all capable of using any weapons you find, but some will be more efficient with a certain type of weapon than others. The 4 classes in this particular game are Claptrap, the Gladiator, the Enforcer, and the Lawbringer. Claptrap mostly focuses on allies and works really well in a party. His abilities are suited towards reacting to the situation at hand instead of specializing in any one thing. He's an absolutely comedic relief style character, and he has been your friend throughout the last 2 games, and he's now one of the playable classes. The Gladiator is more of a psychic mage type character, and she has a shield that she can use to protect herself, or she can do really heavy melee damage, or she can focus on more dot damage or damage over time. The Enforcer focuses more on mobile turrets. One is offensive while the other one is defensive, and his talents are heavily focused on buffing up one or the other. The Lawbringer is the class you're going to see the most in this review because she's the character that I chose to play throughout the game. She specializes in using a gunslinger ability, which is her primary move and lets her automatically lock on targets and shoot much faster and hit much harder than usual. However, classes aside, the game is mostly about the weapons, which have an absolute huge degree of variety. Weapon types in this game vary between a huge range of guns with different abilities and potentially different elemental types. For example, some shots will explode upon impact, some move fast, some move slow, some hit hard but shoot slow, some hit for less damage but shoot really fast, etc, etc. There's a huge amount of variation between the different weapon types. Finding one that suits your playstyle isn't overly difficult, but you're often going to be forced to use the most powerful gun you found recently, as it's kind of going to dictate whether or not you're having a good or a bad time playing through the game. Your weapons become extremely important, and you'll notice the game will go from extremely simple to insanely hard based on how relevant your weapon is at that current point. The game itself is a fairly standard RPG build with a linear story, and you can follow through it, and it offers fun side quests that you can branch off and explore. You're going to need to do at least a few of these if you want to keep your character leveled up with the difficulty of the main story quests, but you don't need to explore every single one in detail unless you really want to. The world in previous Borderlands games has usually been one somewhat rocky planet, and your primary quest has been to find and open this mysterious vault. With the pre-sequel, your story is mildly different, but pulls into the vault hunting pattern as the game progresses. Originally, your main mission is basically to regain control of a space station that's trying to blast apart the planet that contains the vault. Many of the characters and jokes are pulled from previous games, so it's probably not a great place to start with the pre-sequel if you want to understand every facet of the game. However, it does stand on its own well enough that new players aren't going to be left confused and wondering what's going on. The entire game took me about 12 hours to complete, and I did skip quite a few of the side quests, so it was a pretty quick run through. Upon completion of the game, you unlock a new Game Plus mode that gives the game a decent amount of replayability, as well as giving you the option to just go back and play through the game again on a regular difficulty as a different class. Now, let's discuss some aspects of the game and what I thought of them. If you played Borderlands 1 and 2, you're going to be noticing a huge amount of repetition throughout the game. It feels like Gearbox is starting to run a bit dry in the creative front, as many of the jokes are starting to get pretty stale. One character in particular featured in a side quest was a rocket fanatic, and she basically just screamed things at you in an attempt to be funny, but instead it just got grating really fast. They did rename the Skags, however, so there's at least one minor change in the beginning of the game, but for the most part, you're just going to kind of feel like you're just playing through Borderlands 1 and 2 for a 3rd time. Whether or not this sits as a good point for you or a negative point, I'll leave that up to your individual perspective. The level design is somewhat unique as you traverse through the game. There's a few maps that get rehashed a couple of times and reused, but nothing too bad. But for some reason, this world feels a lot less connected and solid than the worlds in the previous Borderlands titles. I was significantly less inclined to go exploring, and I found myself not enjoying the latest edition as much as I did with the first 2. This might not be because the latest edition has any specific problems, but probably because it feels like it hasn't been innovative enough to offer a new full-price AAA title, and instead it feels like a long, drawn-out DLC pack for Borderlands 2. The biggest change in environment was requiring a respirator, as much of the game has like this no atmosphere zone, which really just added a really irritating numerical value to worry about, since running out of oxygen slowly drained your health, so it forces you to go and wait on these little oxygen pads for a couple of seconds in either like a vent or a bubble so you can refill that number, and then you can get back to the game. That's probably the most unique part compared to the other Borderlands games, and it wasn't really what I would call a fun feature. In my opinion, all of the Borderlands titles have suffered from the same downfall. Weapon rolls being entirely random, and also one of the most important parts of the game by far, can get really frustrating. You go from using the same gun for like 3 hours and doing almost no damage, you finally get an upgrade and you basically turn into an overpowered god for the next hour or 2, and then you rinse and repeat the cycle. It's rather frustrating having such random spikes in power that are completely out of your control. At the same time, leveling up only provides you with this minuscule upgrade at best. If they really want to make the game more fun, in my opinion, your damage should be more based around your level and experience, and less importance should be placed on the random values of your weapon. For example, I went from a pistol that did about 45 damage to a pistol that did about 255 damage, and that clearly changed how I was playing through the game pretty well. The last boss took me all of 3 seconds to blast to death with an extremely overpowered laser that I found, and the boss before that I had to struggle and repeat over and over and over because I had this weak 40 damage pistol that just wasn't keeping up. Another irritating thing that sometimes occurs is when you go into the last stand mode, which is what happens when you take fatal damage and it offers you a chance to revive if you kill an enemy unit. The enemies will sometimes all scatter and run away, leaving you basically unable to actually finish any of them off and get this recovery kill. Or sometimes, even better, is you will kill the last enemy and then their dot damage will down you, basically leaving you with absolutely no enemies in sight and nothing to do about it as you slowly bleed out and die. It'd be a lot nicer if they basically just gave you a chance to recover. Maybe if you took no damage for X amount of time, you could get up as well. If you're playing on co-op mode, your allies can pick you up. If you're playing single player like I was, it was extremely aggravating to try to just die in the middle of nowhere with no chance of revival. One of the things that really kind of sucked about the gunslinger that I played through the game with is that she had this power that pretty much gave you auto aim. And it also made you hit about 50% harder, so what ended up happening is you just wait for the short cooldown to come back up and you'd spam your auto aim. What you didn't want to do is fight without it. So basically this class, what I didn't realize when I initially picked it, was that she kind of just removes any of the skill from the game. You just hit your auto aim button, hold down the mouse button, and hope for the best. There's not a whole lot you can really do to influence the outcome of a fight. It's extremely difficult to actually dodge any of the enemy attacks, and there's really not a whole lot you can do other than just kind of wait until the fight's over. As I said, the game's mostly based off your gun. When I had a great gun, I was just plowing through hordes of enemies like they were nothing. When I had a weak gun, I was just getting slaughtered time and time again. Now, the greatest charm about Borderlands is definitely the comedy. The game is usually really hysterical and it has a ton of lovable side characters and different interesting NPCs that you're going to be interacting with. What I didn't realize though until I played through Borderlands the pre-sequel is just how crucial Claptrap is to the game. I didn't actually choose him as a character because I knew I'd be playing alone and he seemed more built around playing with other players. So the downfall is that when you do get rid of Claptrap, there's almost no comedy left. I can't tell you that I found any of the characters in Borderlands the pre-sequel to be overly likable or funny in any way, shape, or form. Jack, who was absolutely hilarious in Borderlands 2, has a few moments throughout the game, but nothing really overly great. Borderlands the pre-sequel has a really just blah cast, and it's really unfortunate because personally I love the humorous style of these games. Now, the weapons in the game I've already mentioned throughout the review can be a little bit irritating, but let's talk about them specifically. For my playthrough, I found a lot of the explosive weapons to be extremely powerful, but extremely not fun to play with because the bullets traveled so slowly and the enemies are constantly shifting that it made it almost impossible to actually land a shot unless you were using auto aim or some sort of slowdown that gave you a chance to hit the enemies, or if you just ran up into melee range. Unfortunately, in Borderlands, I find that melee is often the way to go. Actual long-range weapons are just so much weaker than running up and using something explosive in close range and getting a very quick kill. Because your shields kind of deplete almost instantaneously as you get hit by anything, it's really not worth it to worry too much. You generally want to be very, very close to an enemy. When you get put into the down state, you can't go into any aimed modes, so basically you're never going to hit an enemy unless you're incredibly close to them anyways. So everything about the game forces you to run up and be like face to face with your opponents if you actually want to be successful. Now, you can probably slowly snipe your way through the game, and I'm sure somebody that watches this review is going to tell me how I'm entirely wrong and they did everything with a sniper rifle and it was amazing. But let me tell you, that's going to slow down a game that is not built in that style. Borderlands, and everybody that I know that's played Borderlands, has done the same thing. You eventually just want to run straight at things and blow them up with your best weapon. So there's all these different options and variations, but you generally don't end up using most of them because certain ones are just so much stronger than the other ones. Now, this game also offers you laser weapons, which I found extremely overpowered right away. For me, I finally found a laser weapon that did about 130 damage, and if you get to the last boss and you have something that hits that hard and has a constant beam, you can down her in literally a fraction of a second. She has a few different phases, so you have to go through those, but every single one of them you can fry almost instantly. Really overpowered. However, if you try to use something like pistols, you're going to need one amazing pistol to actually keep up. For the Lawbringer class, she's built around pistols, so I tried to stick with that primarily, but in all honesty, that kind of backfired on me, and I ended up being just really weak and crap. Okay, so for anybody who's played an MMO, you're going to recognize the talent tree system really quickly. The game's built into 3 separate talent trees that give you basically a little bit of a specialization, and you're supposed to work your way through those. You get 1 talent per level, so by level 25 you can finally get the last talent in the tree. This sounds great, but it's honestly not amazing. The talents really don't provide very much, so you feel rather lackluster for most of your levels. The level 25 talent, on the other hand, feels amazing, and there's a mid-tier talent that also kind of boosts your character up quite a bit, but every other level you get feels really lackluster, and the talents feel almost useless. Now, every character is built around a primary cooldown, so there's one button that you're going to push all the time. The Lawbringer, that was the auto-aim button. Now, these are really cool because they give each class their own specific ability, but the downside to it is that you basically end up relying on this absolutely. You need that ability to be up or you're pretty much useless. Now, the way loot works is rather frustrating as well. It's completely randomized. There's certain chests that are guaranteed to have guns in them, but whether they're good or useless is completely optional. And you really don't get much until the very end of the game. This is another one of my complaints about Borderlands. I think it's a great co-op game, and I have a lot of fun playing with my friends, but you know what I don't like doing? I don't like waiting until the last 5 minutes for you to drop all these amazing, epic, legendary weapons for me to go, oh great, now I can have fun on my second playthrough of the game. You know what would be nice? My first playthrough of the game being more fun. There's not enough weapons dropping that you're guaranteed to get a good one of the style that you want. You're pretty much forced to use whatever just happens to come your way. Oh look, I got a good SMG right now. I guess now I'm an SMG class. My class was entirely built around using pistols, and I did use a pistol for a good amount of the game, and then I realized for a long time I was unnecessarily struggling with a pistol, because the second I switched over to a beam weapon, I did amazing in comparison. So they built these classes, which kind of entice you to play with one certain weapon type, and then they drop just random stuff that doesn't really give you the option to actually follow this system or build that you've gone for. So I beat it already, and I played this one alone. Borderlands 1 and 2, I played co-op with friends. Now let me tell you that co-op with friends is the way to go with Borderlands. I didn't not enjoy my time playing Borderlands the pre-sequel. It was pretty fun. I'm not sure I would say it's exactly worth a AAA brand new release full price title, but it's so much better if you play with some friends. For me, the social side really makes a lot of gaming, and I think that Borderlands is no different. One of the greatest features this game adds is not the story, it's not the humor, and it's not the combat. It's the social experience that it offers you. You can have a lot of fun playing through with somebody, and especially, I'm guessing, if you play through with 4 people, although I haven't personally had the pleasure of doing that. So if you're going to play Borderlands, it's definitely worth it if you've got 4 friends. If you're going to play by yourself, I say hold off a little while, maybe spend a little less money. All in all though, not a bad game. I had a lot of fun, and while they set the game up for another sequel, I'm sure I'm going to buy that one too, so I'll see you guys around that time. Anyways, my name is Matt, aka Sciar Rathbun. I'm here with GOMTV to bring you a Borderlands the pre-sequel review. Hope you guys enjoyed this. Let me know in the comments if you have any questions or comments. And make sure to subscribe on YouTube and follow me on Twitter at MattSciar. Thank you guys very much for watching, and I'll see you soon. Okay, so playing through Borderlands, sometimes I found myself getting a little bit frustrated with the game, but all in all, I was having a really fun time. The only thing I really didn't like is how the ability system was set up in this game, because it's just not great. The auto-aim feature on the gunslinger just kind of removes any of the skill and fun for a player. So you're playing with somebody who's really terrible at video games, they might really appreciate that, but for me, I found it just kind of sucked away the enjoyment of actually feeling like I put anything into the game. It was kind of on autoplay for me the entire time. Now, the atmospheres were interesting, but they weren't that amazing, and I really didn't pay a lot of attention to them as I just kind of whipped through the game. Usually the humorous kind of side quests and things like that stop me a lot more often and make me really interested, but in this one I felt like I had to go really out of my way to find these side quests, and I wasn't all that keen on doing that since I just kind of wanted to see what happened with the main story. The main story really didn't get all that great. It's kind of just Jack whining about things, and then the other characters just kind of pop up so that you can be reminded that they exist, but it doesn't really feel all that connected and amazing. The one thing I will say I'm really looking forward to is that Borderlands the pre-sequel, the ending ends with this very ominous, the next game is coming, and I really think that that one might just have a really cool pulled together story. This game felt more like a filler story, like it popped in the meantime to kind of tide you over until the real game's coming out next. I think Borderlands, I'm going to guess they'll call it number 3, is probably going to be a really great game. I'm looking forward to how the story works. I hope that they can get back on track and be a little bit more funny and a little less kind of tedious and boring. Anyways, my name is Matt, aka Sciar Rathbun. I'm here with GOMTV to bring you a Borderlands the pre-sequel review. Hope you guys enjoyed this. Let me know in the comments if you have any questions or comments. And make sure to subscribe on YouTube and follow me on Twitter at MattSciar. Thank you guys very much for watching, and I'll see you soon.